To be honest, I never really liked alcohol. That wasn't what I liked. I didn't like um, alcohol or anything really. I was never in love with that. What I liked was the effect, and I liked the distance because it was very hard, especially towards the end, to be a person in that environment. So it was a cloak for me, and it was a cloak for all my relationships, because being in a band is sometimes it is closer than a marriage and it's closer than a family. And but it's yeah, but it's we spend a lot of time with each other, very changeable parts of our life. I mean, I think about it. My son is 33. He's on the road with a band now, and he's in Europe at the moment, and it's like his experience. I see it, and I can see some parts of my own experience come out, but it's kind of different. But it's always like that. It was always like that from the very beginning, and part of that is the reason why it worked, and part of that is the reason why it got destroyed as well. It's both things. So to me, the point where I left was probably the best thing for me, because I think if I'd kept on down that path, there's a reason the last album, that I did with them was Disintegration, because it was yeah, everything was falling apart. I realized through uh, getting clean and sober that to lots of greater or lesser extent, I'm a black and white person, and I always was. So it's all or nothing. And so for the band, it was everything was the band, everything for a good 15 years of my life. Everything else was separate to that. I flipped it over completely when I came here, and it was the best thing that I did. I mean, a lot of people, I think, come to Los Angeles to be discovered or destroyed. It's or both those things happen, and none of that. Sorry. Well, I found love. Yeah, none of the other stuff happened to me because I didn't need to be discovered, because I kind of knew who I was, and destroyed. Well, I'd escaped that before I got here, and to find like acceptance, which is what I found, and I found acceptance not just in the way of love, but I found acceptance through other creative people. And it saved my life, really, completely and utterly, because without that, I probably wouldn't be here. I'd say to people, if I had stayed in England and kept on the same path. I was talking about this the other night. It was just a point where I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for somebody to relieve me of the burden of my life, So that's what that was. And so it wasn't love. And she's one of the unfortunate ones that didn't survive. She's no longer here. So, my son and I have a very deep relationship, despite all of the things that happened. But I mean, most of it was not our relationship at all. Our relationship was always great, but it was, for him, he's had a difficult time in certain aspects. Humility, yes. What is it? T.S. Eliot says, yeah, humility is endless, right? That's in the four quartets in one of them. I forget which one. East Coca is one of them anyway. And he said, I don't want to, basically, to paraphrase him, because I'm not as eloquent, but he said, don't tell me about the wisdom of old men or anything, because I don't want to know about that. the only wisdom you have is humility, and humility is endless. And that's true. That's completely true because that's the way I approached the whole thing with the book. Because I could have just thought, okay, well, there's one or two things that people do. They either go, okay, I'm going to take revenge for all my, slights, real or imagined, or I'm just going to write a whole load of lies and tell people, no, none of that happened. It was all this. So a good friend of mine called me from New York about 15 years ago and said, "Are you still thinking of writing a book?" Because I talked about it. And I went, "Yeah, you know." And he went, "Okay." And he called my bluff and he said, "A good friend of mine's coming to Los Angeles to open the office of a big publisher. Uh, you should meet him for lunch." And he's still my editor today, this guy, right? Ben Schaefer, wonderful man. Anyway, so he basically put it in front of me. Okay, well, you have a story to tell. If you want to tell it, let's do it. And so it was terrifying at first. But then I realized very early on that if I was not prepared to be totally honest, there's very little point in writing it. It frees you. That whole thing frees you from it all. I have a friend right now who's written a book, and I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't seen the final manuscript, so I don't really want to say, but it's difficult. If if you're not prepared to be honest, completely, you have to be that. You can't walk on, like I always tell my son, great. If you walk on stage and act scared, everybody is going to freak out. I said, you have to go on and just do what they expect you to do. Everything will be fine, you know, even if you're not feeling it. To be honest, right? To be honest, I have like a couple of memories that still, give me a good feeling, and that was like the tour we did with Kiss Me, and we had this curtain at the front of the stage, kabuki curtain. So we walked on stage and nobody could see us, but they knew we were there, and like we start playing and the audience would get, a little restless. And then the second the curtain knocked down, it was like the biggest rush ever because it was just like this explosion because suddenly what they expected was there, but it was instantaneous. So that was really, I think, my favorite moment, if you like, of like, the pure adrenaline rush of it. But fast forward, many years later, and I had suggested to Robert, hey, why don't we go and play these old songs again somewhere because it's coming up to Faith's 30th anniversary or something. We went to Sydney, and I remember that vividly, and I remember it better because, hey, by that time I'd been clean. I've been clean sober for 35 years, so it's like I had a much better, experience of it. But I watched the audience, and I realized what it really is like this sort of feedback loop going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. We give a little, they give a little, it comes backwards and forwards, and it was wonderful to watch because then I could really totally understand why it was needed. Why it was needed, because a lot of times when you're playing, you're wondering, well, why do people want this? Why do they want it? And because they have to want it, because if they didn't want it, we wouldn't have been there. And I saw that it was a two-way street, and it was as much for us as it was for them, and that's a good thing. And now, even today, I do much smaller performances and things and that, but I still enjoy them.